chords and arcs. Okay, this is all new vocab again. Chords and arcs. Put it off. Chords and arcs.
Yes.
Okay, chords and arcs.
We learned about chords yesterday, right?
Yeah, but we're gonna do like theorems and postulates with them so that we can start solving stuff mathematically.
Oh no, I didn't know
Okay.
other pages.
Arc, addition, postulate. Hey, question. What other addition postulates do you have?
Segment,
Angle.
addition, and angle.
What do those say?
This plus this equals this.
The whole, right?
Yeah, the
Large
whole.
plus big equals whole, whatever. Same thing with arcs, okay? The measure of an arc formed by two adjacent arcs in a circle is the sum of the measure of each arc. So if you have arc AD and arc DB and they're touching, they're adjacent to each other, then AD plus DB equals AB. Now, see that nice little thing over top of the letters?
Is that for arc?
That's for arc. So, you have to start putting arcs over them when you're dealing with arcs. When you have a line segment, you just put a segment over it, right? When you have a line, you put something with arrows over it. So for arc, I need a half circle. A little arc mark. Arc mark. Okay, so that should be an easy one. Arc addition should be the simplest thing that you do too.
What does it mean?
What's it mean, what?
Oh, wait. I can remember it. Okay.
Wait. Oh, I thought you were going to.
The second one is congruent minor arcs theorem, okay? There is a difference between a minor and a major arc, okay? A minor arc and a major arc. Let's think about that. Tell me if you can figure out what that means.
Minor's
What?
tiny and major's big.
Okay, but what classifies it to be minor?
The length.
Okay, what length does it have to be less than?
Less than 10.
Less than
half.
less than the circumference.
Less than what?
Half.
Which would be what in a
The
circle?
radius.
What's half of a circle?
The right.
What's a semicircle? No,
A
I
moon.
need degrees.
Oh.
180.
180.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
'Cause
So
it's
your
a-
minor arc is gonna be
'cause
less
it's a
than
compass.
180, and a major arc is gonna be more than 180. Good, guys, good.
We're talking to it.
Good. So congruent minor arcs theorem says this. In the same or congruent circle, so if the circles are congruent, or if it is the same circle, you're working with the same circle. Two minor arcs are congruent if and only if their chords are congruent. Oh my gosh, this reminds me of triangles. Right, like base angles theorem, okay? What's base angles theorem say?
Two triangles.
This was on one of our tests and I have no idea what it was.
Base angles.
What type of triangle you have when you have base angles? No.
Any triangle?
If the two base angles are congruent, what happens?
It's 45, 45, 90.
No.
It has.
Hold on,
well,
run that back.
Technically, it
No.
could be an equilateral.
Run
It's
that.
the equilateral triangle.
What was
If
the
all sides are
question?
equal, duh.
Or, so it could be an equilateral, or it could be what other type of triangle?
Just an acute.
Isosceles.
An isosceles.
Because
Because
the
that
What was
sides
the
are congruent.
question?
So if two sides of a triangle are congruent, then the base angles are congruent. Here, it's basically telling us the same thing. If the chords are congruent, then the arc angles are congruent,
Oh, yeah.
okay?
Wait, I have to finish writing down.
Yeah, Chloe, you get about 30 more seconds.
That's still a lot of time.
1, 2,
Talking like
3, 4,
Oh no.
5, 6, 7.
Stop, you make me laugh.
Let's talk about something too while you're continuing to write. When you are naming, when you are labeling arcs, okay, not only do I need that arc line over it, but I can also tell if something is major or minor by how many letters are under the arc. If it looks like this, arc AB, it's a minor arc. If you have a major arc, you're gonna have
I don't get away.
3 letters.
Oh.
A minor arc is less than half, and a major arc is half or bigger.
Oh, I get
because
why
the
there's
circle is
3.
360.
I
Correct.
get why there's 3.
I remember that.
Tell us, Alex.
Because, why do you get why there's 3? You don't or you do? Here's why, look.
He doesn't.
If
I
I'm
feel like when
doing,
she says it, I
if I'm doing a major arc, okay, here's what's gonna happen.
There's gonna be.
They're gonna have stuff like this,
That's what
labeled on your graph,
Yeah.
okay? They say, what is the major arc? What is a major arc on this graph? Well, if you said AC, that's incorrect, because look, AC is a minor arc.
A, B, C.
A2C.
Oh my goodness, because it's a circle.
So you have to say A, B, C, or A, C, B.
That's crazy.
So what if the dots are like right next to each other?
That's fine, you just
Yeah.
go.
Wow,
Wait,
that's like-
sorry,
wait,
you mean like, if they're like this,
No more.
stop, Chloe. If they're like this, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a minor arc.
Yeah.
This whole thing here is still a minor arc, so you would name it arc AB. This is arc AC, this is arc CB. This is arc ABC.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you gonna say it like you're confused?
Wow.
Oh, I know what you did even though I didn't see it.
Okay, two more. There's lots of theorems and things in here. Perpendicular chords theorem. Perpendicular means what?
90 degrees.
90 degrees. What happened?
I have a question
Perpendicular.
about minor arcs. So can it not work with major arcs?
And what not work with major arcs?
How the thing is congruent? Is it-
Correct, because you'd run out of room on your circle.
Yeah.
Okay. Perpendicular chord theorems. If a chord is a perpendicular bisector of another chord, so if two chords intersect to make a 90-degree angle, okay, then the first chord is a diameter. Boom.
What classifies it as the first one though?
Well, Chloe, which of those two is the diameter?
AB.
Good, okay.
Yes.
So if AB is a perpendicular bisector of EF, then AB is a diameter.
I love this so much.
Which is important because then you can prove things are circles, or you can prove that that circle is congruent to another because the diameters are equal, so on and so forth.
Yeah, what you said.
Courtney, your hair looks good today.
Her hair looks good, fabulous, all the time.
Sorry.
All the time, Courtney's hair is good,
Yeah, she's
Courtney's
been
hair is
here.
good all the time.
Well, I would
Okay.
use right line
Perpendicular
here.
chords theorem converse. What do you think it's gonna say if it's a converse?
If it's if it's the diameter or perpendicular, then the thing is bisects the thing.
Or bisects Courtney.
Yes.
Jacob.
So if
It is a circle.
UW is a diameter and UW is perpendicular to YZ, then it bisects YZ, meaning it splits YZ into two equal parts, correct? Okay. So the perpendicular chords theorem tells me if something, if a smaller chord is bisected by a larger chord, a perpendicular bisector, then it becomes a diameter. The converse tells me if the diameter bisects at a perpendicular angle, then if it hits the other chord at a perpendicular angle, then it bisects that chord.
Wait.
So basically it's saying, yes.
Wait, isn't that common sense though?
What, do we always have to use a reason for everything in this class? Yes.
Do I always have to reason to after what I do?
But I'll still do
I'll give you about 20 more seconds, because we got about 5 more slides. Four more slides.
theorems.
The next one will still be a theorem, maybe,
A, B,
if I recall.
A, diameter,
What upsets you?
and.
What upsets me is when you guys don't memorize them.
Oh,
That's like my grade just
I
got
think this makes me feel better.
What upsets me is when you turn test corrections and they only bring your grade up 2 points.
Okay,
Oh my
the
gosh,
last
another
theorem
one.
is the congruent chords theorem. The last theorem is the congruent chords theorem. Two chords are congruent if and only if they are the same distance from the circle's center. So, if AB is congruent to DE, if and only if CX and CY are congruent, or equal.
That's a fancy circle right
So they have to be equal distance from the center to be equal for the chords. So if I can use the congruent chords theorem to prove that DE is congruent to AB, then what do you know about arc AB and arc DE?
They're similar? I don't know, I just said that. Wasn't
Can you
paying
repeat
attention.
the question?
If you use the congruent chords theorem to prove that DE and AB are congruent, then what can you prove about arc DE and arc AB?
They are congruent.
Why?
Because they have to be congruent.
Why?
Oh, because of the congruent minor arcs theorem.
Correct.
Yeah, that.
So do you see how we're gonna keep using theorems this whole time to prove another thing to get to where we need to
I
go?
love geometry. The theorems go away in algebra too.
But they'll come back in calculus and
I'm
pre-calc.
not taking calculus, I've
Why
decided.
don't they just do them all together?
Yeah, same.
I'm gonna take college
I've decided
algebra.
I'm not taking.
Do you take
I think I'm taking.
These circles.
I think I'm
Chloe,
taking.
Chloe's like, I need to get my
I'm
grade up
trying
higher.
for 8.
I'm just
I
kidding,
feel
I'm
you
probably
there,
going to.
Chloe.
What if I
Yeah.
fail? Can I take it again?
What do you wanna
If I
do
fail,
when
it's
you
a
grow
big deal.
up?
I'm
Right?
going to change it if we keep talking.
Oh, I
I-
can
No.
I'm just trying to draw the picture.
Margo, what do
I
you
know,
wanna do
the
when you
pictures
grow
help
up?
a lot.
Dermatologist.
As soon as you make me
Dermatologist.
understand.
Dang, that's.
And the thing underneath the picture.
Yes,
That's all.
Chloe, you're a visual
Oh,
learner
that's
now.
not-
Get focused.
I'm not gonna have a.
You gotta cut people's
I'd rather see
faces
metal
open.
all day.
What if they have,
Yeah?
you're gonna cut their
You
faces
can
open?
cut
Dr. Pimple Popper
Metal
person?
computer.
Guys,
Dude.
5,
Both those shows.
4, 3,
Take out skin
Lizzie.
and
1.
Lizzie.
You're gonna have to.
The
Okay.
lymphoma.
Find the measure of arc
Tails.
BD.
I
Hey,
know
Wait.
this.
find the
Watch
measure
this.
of arc BD.
It's not an, oh yeah, it is.
Take off.
BD
Oh, okay,
is
so you subtract it from
130.
180.
Yep.
130.
So it's 120. 30.
130.
Okay, and you have to put a degree sign. If you do not put a degree sign with your answers, it's wrong.
Yeah, guys, she's not talking
So what's
to
the
me.
answer?
130 degrees. Because look, you have a half circle right here, yes? Because that's the diameter.
Oh, I get it.
And this
Oh,
is
see,
50.
measure arcs in degrees and not length.
Yes, arcs
Oh.
are measured in degrees.
I thought it was.
Because it's
No,
circle.
because it's the edge of your circle, so it's a degree.
Oh.
okay.
It's a circle. It goes like this.
Got it? So 130 degrees, that's a warm-up problem, pretty simple, yes?
I don't know how they do that.
Everything has a degrees, I have realized. Even circles, they are 360 degrees.
Talking about how he had a lucid dream.
Okay, now,
I'm a canker sore.
properties of chords. This is just what we've talked about in color. Okay, so you need to see it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Okay, the first one was the congruent minor arcs theorem, yes? If two chords are congruent, then their arcs are congruent, yes? Okay, congruent minor arcs theorem. In the same congruent circles, two minor arcs are congruent if and only if their chords are congruent, okay?
Oh, so we're not writing these down?
Guys,
You
you
already
already
have
have
it.
it.
Brandenburg, do you listen?
I'm literally just shoving this into your brain again.
You know I'm joking.
Oh my gosh, hi. Oh my gosh, guys, the camera.
Where do we find the
Guys,
videos
the
again?
Perpendicular chords theorem said if AB is perpendicular to EF, then AB is the diameter. Perpendicular chords converse says if a diameter is perpendicular with a chord, then it bisects that chord and its arc. So the chord and its arc.
So we already had this written down.
So look, I want to double point that out. It bisects this chord, but it also bisects this arc right here.
It splits it in half.
Yes, it
Oh,
splits
wow.
it splits the chords in half and the arc in half. Okay. That was what this lesson's about.
What's the homework I like writing at the bottom of my notes? How do we draw an arc?
What do you mean how do you draw an arc?
How do we show that part out?
John, are you?
Look at my board.
Yeah.
Oh.